Well, the trade patterns are shifting. In a sense, today the underlying social, demographic, and economic developments are shaping trade patterns. For example, if you want to be a global manager, you need to understand the country's history and geography more than economics and sociology or the personal things. Similarly, you also look at customization, mostly in the industry sector. Everybody wants a customized solution, even in logistics as well. Information management has become a critical enabler in terms of making and helping you to trace and track your cargo and consignment. And finally, companies are becoming more conscious about the planet. The three P's people talk about. So when it comes to carbon efficiency, fuel efficiency, that logistics industry or supply chain managers are possibly one of those who are guzzlers of fuel and creating more havoc across. But end of the day, consumers who would be more interested to work with companies who reduce the carbon footprints. Right, so when I mentioned about shifting trade patterns, today you will see the businesses coming largely from intra-Asia, which is a combination of Asia, China and Asia Pacific. Then you will have Latin America, which is also contributing significantly to the logistics, and also the Middle East, Africa and Asia. Again, the country's challenges, imports are growing and the exports are down. So possibly we need to ensure that exports starts increasing, and that's where the manufacturing policy which has been released would come into play. But largely, this is where the trade patterns are shifting, which means supply chain professionals have to understand the geography, the history of these countries, and tomorrow they might even find opportunities in these countries, not just in India itself, as future supply chain management professionals or CEOs.
For instance, in the pharmaceutical industry, the customer is highly unaware of the end of the product. In that case, how do competitive advantage actually favors? Because the customer is unaware of terms like the contraindications of the drugs and all. So I would like this question to be answered. Yeah.
Specifically, if you talk about the patient. So and patient in India versus the countries outside. So there's a lot of awareness, outside India about patient knowing the products and so on and so forth. But in India, there's a lot of awareness program that is done through the doctors. So if you will see today, Glaxo conducts 3,000 programs around cities with the doctors. So because the pharmaceutical companies by law of land are not allowed to advertise, not allowed to do those patient awareness programs. That's certain laws protecting that. However, it is expected that the doctors, across the country, are supposed to do that program when they consult the patients. That's how companies spend money through various programs. Educating the doctors and allowing them to learn the new lunches, the new formulations that is coming on board and so on and so forth. Does that?
Just to add to this, see, the regulator plays a major role in this, because you cannot expect each and every patient to know about the drug and its effect. So the regulator plays the major role of safeguarding the interest of the public. As Satyapad explained, the pharmaceutical companies which produce the medicines, there's a lot of work in training the doctors. That is the major role, because doctors' education is very important. A lot of efforts are made on doctors. So that way consumer is protected. So I think it is uncompromised, because at the end of the center of all pharmaceutical companies is the well-being, the health care of the health. So there cannot be any compromise. So that is highly protected. There are incidences where things went wrong and people start recalling all those things. That is part of any business systems. I am a regular reader of Hindu. I don't know whether you have to ask. There is a recent open page article where the doctor got just frustrated by the patient because he keep on searching the Google and coming up with each and every side effect of the drug what doctor is producing. And the doctor finally got frustrated and said, okay, this is what I know because the information is plenty available, but don't get confused. But
operational. How do you manage to fulfill both the obligation and still maintaining the profitability for the organization?
Available is an unmet medical need or something a novel drug. So the challenges are entirely different. If you look at a new drug which was not done earlier, so currently either it is not available or the patient is not able to afford it. There are a couple of medicines which Dr. Reddy's launched as a new product. They are far lower than what the current market is. These are all direct competitive either to innovator or few people who are taking. So this is the way you make it affordable for the patient. But when it comes to a commoditized product, then the competition is very high. Then there you have to find out which you have a core strength, either due to your chemical process or due to your efficiency in handling such reactions. Then you create competitive advantage. So these are the two challenges are entirely different. So this is how we manage. So in one hand, you get inputs at the right price and start at the point, make your process more robust so that you don't have any surprises in them.
Global sourcing of the materials also. So what I feel is the biggest challenge for now the OEMs is what happens to any of the tier 1 or tier 2 suppliers existing in a separate country which has faced a disaster. Like for instance in Fukushima nuclear disaster. During that scenario, many global companies faced crisis because the tier 1 and tier 2 suppliers in that country suffered. So this is a complete chain of supply chain risk management. So how companies are opening up in addressing this kind of issue? I'm sure there must be, this is a very serious issue coming for the coming trend.
Management as a subject has been there in finance for a very long time. There's nothing new about it. So most of the techniques what we get into supply chain management in terms of risk management, we are all importing from finance. That is what we are doing, and we are creating a new body of knowledge. And right now the body of knowledge is not very mature. But the courses are being taught. We have created some certification program also in ethics, but that's very evolving actually. It's very new. Okay, we don't have a solid methodology and foundation and everything for the risk. One thing I can tell you is that a lot of in terms of sourcing, there was a practice which was being thought as the best practice to have a single source of supplier, to depend on one source so that they can give you more volumes, you can give stable business, and therefore cost will come down, dependability will be reduced, and so on and so forth. So there was a move to reduce your number of vendors, your number of suppliers, and that is changing again because of the same thing what you said. People are looking at 2 and 3 again, so that when you are importing material from various geographies, if something goes wrong, which something can. So you don't suffer. So that is, so this change is happening.
So a few years ago, you must have heard of this, the Toyota, the Toyota Etios, I think, right? That was a model that was launched and it got delayed. There was no availability because the components were all getting sourced from Thailand. The Toyota plant in Thailand, and there were floods in Thailand at that point of time. So these are some of the risks that are going to be there. And the automotive sector is, they've gone almost overboard on operational efficiency to an extent. And this was what I was alluding to when I spoke about using it more as cost containment. They've gone so extreme on cost containment that it's almost got to a one supplier scenario, and they invest in that supplier. And they make him or her, that supplier, responsible for everything, every component that comes. They have a